This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
The book of Romans exemplifies Paul's struggle to get the church in Rome to understand that their mission was so much more than a human experience. And Allan Aguirre echoes this warning to us to get us ready for what's coming. Battling in the Spirit. It's a whole other mindset because it's the end of the sixth day. The sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Hey, Shabbat Shalom to our fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. We have an extra special treat for you tonight. We have been telling you all about the Ambassador Club program in which we invite people to bring it to the world. And we have a story tonight from a guy in Argentina who is doing just that. Your support brought the message of Yeshua through this ministry to this young man, and today he's working with our Spanish team and even helping with our YouTube videos. And guess what he uses? The chronological Gospels in Spanish. Let's talk about it with my co-host, Matt Weimer. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, this is literally bringing it to the world. Our Spanish team, well, we don't even call them the Spanish team anymore. It's just, they're sort of our social media team.
Right.
Before we used to have a dedicated Spanish ministry that handled all of the Spanish world, and they still do. Mm-hmm. But now it went international, and they handle all kinds of other languages, and now we just we're working more together. And they're telling us these stories that we didn't even realize on the English side of things. And there's some really amazing testimonies of folks on the Spanish side of things where it's really affecting lives around the world. And this sort of brings out what Allan Aguirre brings out in this teaching that he's going to do tonight, that this is so much more than a human experience. We're all connected by the Spirit. And sometimes I forget about that. And I don't, do you have trouble kind of grasping that as well sometimes, that this is so much more than just what we're living today?
Yeah, admittedly, it's not something I think about every day or a lot, really. But yeah, I mean, we are spiritual beings, like he's saying, but we're just in this carnal body.
Yeah.
But our carnal body isn't what makes us us. It's our soul, our spirit inside of us.
Yeah, and yet it still matters what we do with this life. Right. Someone might look at that and go, well, it doesn't matter what I do then. I'm just a spiritual being and I'm just here for a little while, so whatever. But we're given this time period to actually do something, and that's
right.
I think to some degree, some of us realize that more than others, and I think sometimes it's honestly, it's struggle. We brought this out last week a little bit, that it's struggle that brings us to that realization, because otherwise, what do we need God for?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the reason we have these struggles, to bring us closer to Him. If we never go through anything in life, we're going to get complacent. So He throws things at us sometimes, or allows things to happen, so that we can go, hey, I'm struggling with this, Father. Please help me. Mm-hmm.
And isn't it funny how sometimes He does that with, like you think of the Israelites with the desert experience.
Right.
So free us from slavery. If we're just freed from slavery, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how often have we had that in our lives? God, if you just did this in my life, everything would be okay. Okay, here you go. Welcome to the desert.
Right.
Freed from slavery. You like this?
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be over here in the promised land.
Yeah.
Not yet. Mm-hmm. You got to learn some things before I let you get into the promised land. I've learned that with just business ownership and that kind of thing. It's like, God, if I could just do this, just get ahead. How many, as Americans, we just want to get ahead, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And now I think I realize, sometimes that's getting ahead of God.
Exactly. He has to give us, each and every one of us, our own wilderness experience before we can enter that promised land.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then in that experience, we learn to depend on Him, right? So we won't forget. Remember the Red Sea? I did that. Remember this? Remember that? And yet we still forget. So that's why we keep having to go back to the desert sometimes. And,
that's right.
And learn these things. So hopefully we don't learn, we learn from this and don't have to enter those desert times too often.
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyways, what's really encouraging is to see how those, honestly, who have less than us. That's kind of why we keep talking about the Latin world, is that yes, they learn from Michael Rood's teachings. I mean, the followings, I don't know if you've seen the video, like sometimes the video counts in Spanish on Michael Rood stuff are crazy.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Compared to the English, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And yet, It's always been, because we also have to run the ministry like a business, and we look at that and go, yeah, but there's no funding coming in for this. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a lot of folks watching this stuff in other countries that are not blessed like the US.
Right.
Their dollar is not worth as much as ours. And so it's hard for them to donate to a ministry. They will take what Michael Rood's teachings are, and they'll do their job and they'll spread it around.
Exactly.
That's all they can do, right?
Yep, exactly. They're very diligent in that.
They are, yeah, exactly. And so that's why we have things like the Ambassador Club, like our YouTube membership, all that kind of stuff, because if they're doing that job and maybe we're stuck in a job and not able to do as much evangelism as they are, maybe we can just speak with our wallets, right? And give to what is happening, because it is affecting lives, but it takes funding to make that happen. And if we're the rich country that has to make that happen, well, maybe that's our job.
Exactly.
Right? And that's why we do what we do. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that, because sometimes if you see this online, it's like we're talking about stuff like, our YouTube membership, then we have the Love Gift, and we have the Ambassador Club, and some folks give us heck online saying, you're all about money, money, money. Well, yeah, because other folks who are being affected by what's happening on the screen here that you benefit from as well, they can't afford to support it. And it takes support to make that happen and push it out there. I mean, there's a lot of people who have given up vocations in other worldly jobs that they could have had to work here, honestly, for less, a lot of the time, most of the time, in order to do this. So yes, as Paul said, don't muzzle the ox while he's treading out the grain. That's really what it comes down to. So if you can support, we thank you for that very much. Now, of course, if you're watching this on Shabbat, we don't want you to do that on Shabbat. Just keep this in the back of your mind, so that after Shabbat, if you could support any one of these things we've talked about, it's affecting lives, even lives you don't know about in other countries that we're talking about, especially folks in the Latin world. So we just wanted to encourage you with that, and thank you for that, for supporting this ministry, because that is what you're doing. You're affecting people in other countries. They're stepping up and doing ministry as a response to say thank you. Okay, coming up next, the book of Romans exemplifies Paul's struggle to get the church in Rome to understand that their mission was so much more than a human experience. And Allan Aguirre echoes this warning to get ready for what's coming. Get us ready. It's the fourth and final episode of Romans Revelations right after the Kiddush.
Shalom, hello, my name is Esteban. I'm from Argentine. Years ago, I came across with Michael's teachings in the YouTube channel because I was searching for information about the Bible, so I came across with the teachings on the Feast of the Lord, the Feast of Jehovah. So I started to learn about the ministry of Yeshua, the connection between the Torah and the prophecies of the Old Testament about the Messiah and the ministry of Yeshua. So it was a blessing to me, that teachings, and it's a blessing to me, all the teachings of the ministry. Also, I want to share with you that I'm the leader of the Telegram group of the ministry, the Spanish group, that has roughly 1,000 members right now. So I can share with others and help others to understand the gospel, the scriptures, with the help of the ministry. So the ministry is being a blessing not only for me, but for the community all across Latin America, and with all his teachings and the chronological gospels, it's really a blessing. So that's all that I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much. Yehovah bless you.
On the morning that the Passover lambs were selected, there were 2 loaves that were put on the wall of the temple. When the first one was removed, after that, no more leavened bread was eaten. When the second loaf was removed, then all of the leavened bread in the land of Israel was then burned, because the feast of unleavened bread was going to commence at sunset that evening. The night before, Yeshua took artos. He took leavened bread, and he blessed the Most High in the presence of his disciples, and he interpreted the Kadosh Mikra, the holy rehearsal that Melchizedek put in place with Abraham. Yeshua said the prayer of the Melech Tzaddik, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem haaretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And he said, this represents my body, which is now broken for you. As often as you do this in remembrance of me. Then Yeshua took the cup, and he said, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, the King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And then he said, you take my cup, divide it among yourselves. I will not drink a sip of the fruit of the vine till I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom. So as often as we do this now, we rehearse not only his death, but we rehearse that we will be at the marriage supper of the Lamb, and at the marriage supper of the Lamb, he will take his cup and say, L'chaim, to life everlasting. And until then, Shabbat Shalom.
So earlier in this series, you heard me complain that when I was in church, I never heard the how to be a Christian. It was always the what and the concepts and the theory of being a Christian, but it was never practically, what do I do every day? What does loving my neighbor look like? What is trusting in God and loving Jesus? How am I supposed to do this? And so the answer actually is in the Torah through the book of Romans and the Apostle Paul. And here to explain all that is Allan Aguirre. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
So we have gone through a lot of your book, Romans, A Call to Belong, right there. Yeah. A great book. It helps us, I think, to re-examine what Romans is all about and really get to what Paul is saying. Because as you said at the beginning of the series, even Peter says, look, Paul's tough to understand. You got to understand, folks, that he's teaching Gentiles and he himself is a Pharisaical Jew, and he's trying to unravel from his stuff and unravel them from their stuff and meet in the middle. So no wonder it's hard to understand.
Yeah, and he's trying to get them to understand it and do it right, correctly. Because,
in the face of Judaizers coming and messing it all up. And
that's always, I find that as you know, and as you've mentioned, I was a professional musician for the majority of my life. And so in order to try to make a living out of that, you have to be able to connect with people as a songwriter. Society. So the whole social construct of man is a fascinating study, something I've been involved with for a long time because of my profession. Well, when you bring that into the faith realm, it's really, really scary because you have to start looking into, I kind of mentioned it in here, I'm the guy that, if you ever gone fishing with your grandpa when you were a kid or whatever, and you're using a traditional spin cast reel, and if you don't do it right, your line can just, it becomes a bird's nest, right? Mm-hmm. Most people are just going to cut it off and go on. I'm the one that I will actually untangle it. I'm that guy. So untangling all this goofy stuff, why does man and how does man, especially when it comes to faith, it's insane. So the whole concept of wanting, Paul's trying to teach, I think he might have been that kind of guy too. Paul wants to teach these people how not only just to do it, but to do it correctly, because apparently there's all these various ways people can do all these various things, and they're not always the correct way to do it. I mean, Israel they were sacrificing to goat demons out in the bush, and no, bring that back. Well, I find that a fascinating thing, and Paul's trying to teach them how to do it correctly, not just to do it. Yeah.
So how do we do it? Like if there's no literal temple, I think that's what a lot of Christians have an issue with what we do. Because, there's no temple anymore. What are you doing? That was abolished. The law is gone, all the rest of it, right? So no, we're supposed to take the idea of the temple, just like we talked about in an earlier episode about, the whole reason God had us build a tabernacle in the wilderness was a model
Right.
of what's already existing in heaven. So the temple is not to be worshipped itself. It is a model of what God, how he wants us to relate to him, right? I mean,
Right.
So
And going back to that weird, goofy society thing, how man does what he does, it clearly states in the New Testament that our body is now that temple. So there shouldn't be a disconnect, even though there still is. All right, so your body's now the temple. How do you function correctly if you're the temple? You don't want to defile your temple by things that you do coming in or going out. You have to take care of it. You have to honor it and all that, because, and the whole temple thing actually is part of the whole sexual immorality thing. When it came to sexual immorality, don't you know your body is the temple of God? That's where that comes from, because sexual immorality is perversion to that temple. But in the same way, we call it temple speak, right? Because that's what it is. Part of that is the sacrifices and the offerings. And to have a reference, so if I'm going to write to a group of people and I'm going to use the words, you need to throw your body on the altar like a living sacrifice. If you don't have a reference to the sacrifices, Levitical priesthood, blah, 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 that's going to sound a little weird. Well, that's what Paul says in chapter 12, right out, at the very top of chapter 12. We're supposed to throw our bodies on the temple, on the altar as a living sacrifice, correct?
yeah.
He's getting that from Psalms 50. And and why? We do that holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship or your logical temple service in some other translations.
Logical temple service.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then he talks about not being conformed to the world, right? But be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Well, if you're going to throw yourself on first of all, voluntarily throwing yourself on an altar to be sacrificed isn't something that a lot of us aren't going to do. Another thing a lot of us aren't going to do is allow ourselves to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. This is beginning of chapter 12. And we're going to lose a lot of people just there. You would think Israel would be a clear case to do this, and they themselves weren't very cooperative. When you start introducing male and female prostitutes into the temple for sin atonement, putting Baal altars, Ashtoreth, all that, they were able to pervert it, and they had a reference, and a tangible reference. How much harder is this for people without any reference at all? Again, that's why Paul was brought in to faith, to be able to unpack the scriptures to a pagan people group without a reference experience. And Romans is a big part of that.
Now, with Romans, in a previous episode, we had mentioned that obviously they knew something about the law, because he says, you already know. So do you think this is another case of that where, you know about the temple service, so you know how serious I'm being about putting yourself on an altar. You know what that's about, and you've seen it, and you've experienced it, and how traumatic that is.
Godly or ungodly, even pagan-wise, right?
True, yeah. And again, that speaks to the whole sexual immorality thing, like you said, because other temple or other religions, and even if the Israelites were disobeying, that they brought the temple prostitutes into the mix, and God's like, that very thing? No.
Can't do that. Right. And here's why he's asking us to do this, or here's why he's instructing us to do this in verses 1 and 2. You go to the next verse. What is good, acceptable, and perfect according to God? What is his will? You'll be able to discern all of that through testing. And that's very difficult for a lot of people, because in order to test God's will for your life, in order to know God's will, let alone test it to determine whether it is or not, requires discernment. Everybody and their mother is going to say, yeah, I have discernment. Have you ever considered what the Gospel of Judas might have sounded like if he had lived long enough to write one? It'd be a little twisted, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Right? How much do you want to bet that his action of turning Jesus over to the Sanhedrin, how much you want to bet he did that based on discernment? That he would say, this is what I discerned that I should do. This is what God would have had me do.
To further the process, to make the prophecy happen, type of thing.
Right. So Judas used his discernment. So, a lot of people believe they have discernment. A lot of people, I think, are deceived in believing they have discernment. And Paul is suggesting that that's one of the things we need to do in order to be able to determine and test God's will for our life.
So what is true discernment?
Well, Hebrews says it's a really hard thing. Have you ever, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no.
Here, watch, check this out.
Okay.
This is what I say. Some people have discernment and others don't. That said, discernment can be taught and learned. It is an indispensable and foundational characteristic that needs to be present in the ever-growing arsenal of our faith profiles. Check this out. Hebrews chapter 5, 11 through 14. I'm on page 200.
200, that's what I thought. Okay.
About this, we have much to say, and it is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing. For though, and this is the English Standard, for though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness since he is a child. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. But that begins with, this is hard to explain. Discernment isn't easy. It's, in my experience through music, you meet a lot of people that are involved with the occult, in witchcraft, real bad stuff like that. And the real scary part about that is the majority of them, 75% of them maybe, came from the church. They're like really disgruntled youth group kids or whatever, right? They didn't see the power. They didn't see the authority. They didn't see those attributes in church because they don't have them, right? And they wanted. They read stuff like this. They read about discernment. They read about miracles and supernatural. All that stuff. All that stuff. The majority of Christendom says isn't applicable, isn't available today. God doesn't do that anymore, and so they were seduced by the enemy into the occult because they give that away freely there. And we call that, the strange fire. What happened to Aaron's sons. Discernment is one of those things. I mean, without discernment, I don't know how you can do this thing in any way, shape, or form with any success or with any fruit without a level of discernment. And when you're deceived, you don't know that you're deceived. Discernment is everything. I mean, without discernment, how do you know if that's an angel or a demon? How do you know if that's stick or snake? You know what I'm saying? Holy or profane. How do you know that without discernment? So part of learning that, Paul says, is you have to throw yourself on the altar as a living sacrifice. Man, that's like, what did Jesus, was it Jesus that said you're going to take up your cross daily? That's even more intense than that. I mean, it's all those combinations of us dying to ourselves isn't a popular thing. I don't think it's really taught to that extent of like, hey, this is what that could look like. And without it, we're not going to have the attributes, characteristics, physical or spiritual, that are required to succeed.
So in simple language, throwing yourself on the altar, dying to self, this is
how you live.
How you live, forgetting what you want, living how God, just listening to the Spirit for every move you make, and thereby you will discern because you're listening to Him more and you know who's talking to you.
It'll help the process, but a lot of that, what you just said, the way you just explained it, a lot of that was, that's how we were introduced to salvation in the first place. We lost something along the way.
Well, and the writers of Hebrews appears to be even ticked about that.
You should.
It is hard to explain since you have become dull of hearing, you jerks. It almost sounds like,
Yeah. Well, here, look at this.
You ought to be teachers.
Yeah, check this out. According to the above passage from Hebrews, a lack of discernment, physical and or spiritual, is synonymous with being dull of hearing, unskilled, childish, and immature. The disciples' inability to grasp the teachings of Jesus was attributed to their lack of understanding, for example, in Matthew 15:16. The Greek word for without understanding also means unintelligent, stupid, and foolish. Proverbs, the fool, he's dumb and lazy. And how do you break that dull, dumb and laziness off of you? Fear God. In the beginning of that, in the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And then the next step is Torah observance. In order to even hear wisdom's cry in the street, so that you'll obey it. But then he doesn't, and calamity befalls him, and wisdom mocks him for being dumb and stupid, dumb and lazy. So a lot of people don't like those type of words being used because they're not polite. Jesus used them when it came to explaining a human being's inability to comprehend, understand, change, course correct, hardness of heart is what we're talking about, in order to be able to walk in his likeness, to walk as a being of light. We're supposed to be image bearers, right? Well, apparently you have to be a little quick to be that guy, People don't like that. We're not saying dumb, stupid people can't. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is there's a certain level we're supposed to be functioning at as representatives of Messiah. And in order to do that, there are rules of engagement we're going to have to submit to. But at the same time, there's certain personality and characteristics that we're going to have to, if we don't have them, obtain or do what's necessary to develop them.
Every month, A Rood Awakening International prepares a special gift for you to thank you for your donations that help us bring the truth of Yeshua to people who don't understand who he is. We call it a love gift. And this month's love gift includes a special teaching that's not on YouTube or anywhere else. It's called Why Don't We Believe, featuring one of our favorite guest speakers, Allan Aguirre. And the teaching is just the beginning. We also have an exclusive fall feast pillow and a brass tea light incense burner with a supply of frankincense resin. A donation of $300 gets you all three of these gifts, but only in October. Even a donation of just $100 gets you the teaching and the pillow. And if you need to do $50, we'll still give you the teaching. And you have 3 ways to watch it. Choose our streaming option so you can watch the teaching anywhere on the michaelrood.tv app. Or it's also available on DVD or Blu-ray. You can get these gifts this month only by scanning the QR code or calling the number on your screen, or you can get them online at monthlylovegift.com.
You said somewhere in here, trying to figure out if it was in your book or in your notes that you had here, it's difficult to be an image bearer of light if you don't put on the full armor. I guess.
Yeah, because in Romans, he says to put on the armor of light.
Yeah.
So if we're supposed to be light bearers, image bearers, putting on the weapons and armor of light. I think it's at the very beginning. I paraphrase it, but it's, I know it's on the title page. Yeah, the night is almost over, the day is at hand. So then, let us cast off the works of darkness and arm ourselves with the weapons and armor of light. Chapter 13, verse 12, paraphrase. Man, it's, that to me, that automatically throws me in Ephesians 6 mode, taking on cosmic powers of ruling darkness. I mean, there's nothing natural or earthly about that. Right. That's full-on supernatural. And we're supposed to, right? That's why we put on the whole full armor of God, is to take on the ruling principalities, powers of cosmic darkness. These are the different words used in the different various translations for Ephesians 6. wow, there's nothing subtle about that. There's nothing passive about that. There's nothing earthly bound about that either.
Right. So
It's all supernatural.
You can't be working from human up. You have to go from spiritual down. Like we talked about, we've got it backwards.
Right.
We think we're humans trying to experience the spiritual when it's the other way around.
Right. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. I mean, how are we going to get past what's coming? What's coming is ancient. We don't have to fear it because we serve the Ancient of Days. But what's coming, the false prophet, the beast system, the Antichrist. I mean, all of this is designed to, well, we can read it in Revelation 17. It tells us exactly. It's to war against the saints and to devour them. How are we going to do that if we're straining on the net of whether I can eat pork or not?
Right. Right.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Again, it's that lowest common denominator mentality. You know, there's that great meme about, oh yeah, you're going to have this great international worldwide ministry, but you won't clean toilets or stack chairs after church. You know, it's the same thing. You can't remember to turn off your light when you leave the room or wash your clothes. You know, I've lived in communities, so these are things that happen in communes. You know? But you're going to take on the world, and you're going to. There's this great testimony I have of healing. This healing that happened in Nashville. I know we've talked about it on here before. The rest of it was a band, and one of the band members had this really horrible. He had destroyed his hip in a car accident. So he had this horrible limp. One leg was, 2 inches short. It was horrible. And the rest of his bandmates knew him before that. And they're all pastors' kids and stuff. And they wanted to pick in my brain because, you know, I'm a music industry professional, whatever. And I asked them basic questions. Well, what do you want to do with your band? You know, what's your end game? Oh, we want to change our generation. We want to bring the power of God to our generation. I mean, that's literally what they said. Awesome. And then later on that, few hours later, this particular member of this band supernaturally was healed. I wasn't praying for him. I wasn't looking at him. I hadn't laid hands on him. But he was listening intently to the conversation I was having with the keyboardist, and all I was doing was going through what I was going to teach on the next day at this event in Nashville at the Gospel Music Association thing, and I was teaching on what we call the Joshua principle, and the authority of what I was speaking provoked healing in this young man, and it absolutely terrified his band members. I mean, absolute fear.
And they weren't happy about it? They were overjoyed? They were like, what happened?
I'm now a warlock. This happened because I'm a warlock. Well, they called me a witch. And I'm like, well, the actual word is warlock. I am a boy. When you start getting stupid like that, I'm going to get snarky.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Explain to me how. You're all pastor's kids. Your buddy, lifelong friend, has just been supernaturally healed by Holy Spirit. You want to call it demonic, just like the Pharisees. How are you going to change your generation, to God? Change and bring your generation to God when you don't even know it's God when He shows up.
Did you tell him that?
Oh yeah. The singer came looking for me. He wanted to beat me up. Oh, it was awesome. I just sat there. Remember I used to smoke? I just sat there, kicked back, lit up a cigarette, waiting, because they dragged him, after he was healed, they dragged him away from me. We got to get you away from him. And he's like, no. Oh yeah, they were freaked.
So the guy who got healed, though, did he recognize what had happened?
Yeah, he knew exactly what was going on. But peer pressure, they're young and all that. Yeah. But anyway, so they ended up dragging him away. Singer was never there for any of it, heard about it. He comes looking for me. He wants to beat me up. I'm like... Go ahead. Do you think I'm afraid of you? That's just silly. But they were terrified. I bring that up only to say, in the same way, that disconnect, there's such a massive disconnect. How are we going to do any of this if we can't even figure out during peacetime, let alone cosmic warfare time, the basic essentials of the spiritual realm, like he told Nicodemus, if we can't get these basics, I mean, if we can't get this right, we don't want to get it right because it's going to cost us too much. There's that whole dying to self thing again. I don't think they get it right because they're not going to do the course correction needed, throwing themselves on the altar. They have to die. They have to allow themselves to be broken on the rock of salvation. And he brings that up, the being stumbled by the cornerstone, by Jesus. Jesus is the stumbling block. That's in here too. I mean, talk about a guidebook for going forward.
Yeah. Now, speaking of being weak and unlearned and all this, and you know where I'm going with this.
Do you love the way how do you love the chapter title there?
Well, yeah, Veggie Tales was always a favorite of my kids. Tell me about the Veggie Tales.
So
what is
Paul, okay, apparently in Rome, some of the congregants were afraid. Trying to figure out which way I should approach this. Okay, there's in the Bible, in the New Testament, if the word is food, that means it's clean, because if it's not food, it's not food.
Right.
It's non-food, right? So in Mark 7, when Jesus said that little side note that's not really in there.
Thus he declares all food clean.
He declares all food clean. Well, of course, all food is clean because it's food. If it's not clean, it's not called food. Right, there we go again.
Whether it's in the Bible or not, you didn't understand it right.
Right.
Yeah.
So apparently there was people in Rome that were afraid. Okay, and then again, I had to explain in the book, Acts 15, the rules of what they implemented on Gentiles: don't eat blood, strangled meats, and food offered unto idols. I had to explain all that. And so you explain all that, and then you get to the point where even though the food is clean, because it's called food, that's our clue, even though it's clean and edible and you can eat it, there was apparently enough people that had chosen not to eat meat in fear that it might have possibly been offered to idols. So, as not to make the mistake or to break the halakha of eating food offered unto idols, we're just not going to eat meat at all, and they went vegetarian. Okay? Well, Paul calls them weak. Let me find that in here because it's pretty, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
And a pretty elementary interpretation of that these days is, oh, well, if you want to be vegan, you're weak-minded.
Well, yeah, there's that too, right?
Like, okay, that's really, really
Here's how I started off. Romans 14 is widely used by mainstream Romanized Christianity to discredit Torah observance, diet, the feast days, and the Sabbath, regardless of what Paul is actually instructing. Much of what we have discussed thus far on how and why people read and extrapolate Paul incorrectly can be summed up largely on how this chapter is mistaught and misquoted. And then I give examples: Matthew 15, 16, 2 Peter, right? Lack of intelligence, stupidity, foolishness, ignorance, instability, twisting of Scripture, okay? So that's already, I have to explain the halakha rules from Acts 15, and then after that, here, it's good. I have to explain food unto idols out of 1 Corinthians. You don't eat food offered unto idols, even though it's idols not real, for your conscience. Especially if you've been told it's been offered, then don't eat it because they told you.
right.
Because it's a testimony type of thing.
I have a book at home, originally written in Hebrew, now it's in English, from a man who lives in Israel named Rabbi Shalom Arush. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this book called The Garden of Peace. It's for men only, by the way. That is, you could take it or leave it. There's a lot of rabbinic things in there that we may not necessarily want to pay attention to, but there's a lot of wisdom as well. And one of the things he says Men, your wife is the conduit to the Holy Spirit. So she may be getting downloads that you're not getting, so make sure you listen to her because there may be something God wants to tell you and it's coming from her. Now, we looked at that from a perspective of a rude awakening. There's a lot of us guys on camera here, not a lot of women. So we thought, it's high time we get something from a woman's perspective. So I present to you From the Heart. These are women from the Rood crew who are giving downloads from God to you in a way that us guys just can't do. You can see From the Heart Sundays 11 a.m. on the michaelrood.tv app and on YouTube.
So totally avoiding just in case it was that's called the being the weaker vessel.
Because all of this requires our sussing it out, figuring it out. They're not even taking,
or being lazy, I guess.
That would
what
be
it is.
Yeah, exactly. Because stewardship, taking responsibility, figuring this stuff out. Instead, they're just being lazy. Paul's calling them weak for doing that. So the fact that they weren't going to do the work of, we have to do the work of looking for the new moon, looking for the Abib. These are just examples. This is the life that we've been given, the life we signed up for. Well, part of that is sussing out food and non-food. And they weren't. So they just went straight veggie. So what have we done? So the mainstream church, what they've done is they've taken this topic, this conversation Paul is having, and used it to say, see, we can eat whatever we want, and we don't have to keep the feasts. Kind of in line with Colossians 2, twisting, right? So by doing so, because the weaker brother isn't the guy you want to follow. You don't want to follow him. You don't want to, I'm going to really not want to, he doesn't offer a lot to me when it comes to spiritual guidance or counsel or advice.
He's still learning.
Yeah. Not even.
Yeah.
It's even worse than that, right? So I'm not really going to listen to this guy. He's not leadership material, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, for the church as a whole, all these centuries, to decide that what Paul is saying is, you don't have to worry about feast days, you don't have to worry about diet. They then, by proxy, by default, are the weaker brother of Romans 14. It's pretty jacked up. It's not good. It's so incriminating.
Because we're being lazy.
And not bright. We're being ignorant and
not being a
Berean. We're not being Bereans at all. All the attributes, all the words, you can look them up, all the words used for hardening of hearts, like in the Gospels that Jesus used, that called them basically not very smart guys. Yeah.
What's the Hebrew word for dummies?
I don't know.
Goodness.
I haven't looked that one up.
We got about 5 minutes left. I want to get to one thing you wanted to say in this this series. It was the last part of your section 4 is the call to belong. So with all of that said now, it seems that Romans is not as simple as we think it is, and yet it's very simple, but we're overcomplicating this a little bit because of the way Paul speaks.
If you know what he's talking about, it's simple. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have a reference, it's over their head. It's beyond their pay grade.
Right. So we need to get back to that baseline of you got to learn Torah. Learn these 4 things because the Torah is talked about in every Sabbath and every synagogue. What does that mean? Go learn the details later. Do these basic things to get your foot in the door and go learn this stuff later.
Yeah. If they would read it as he wrote it, and which is why I use so much of the citations. This is where, because he's literally citing the Tanakh all over the place. If you read what he wrote, read the citations, use even the English Standard Version scholarly cross-references are going to help. They'll get it, but they won't do it.
So Romans is a call to get it.
I
a call
believe
to
it is.
belong. This is for you. I was a Pharisee, and yet I want you Gentiles to come along. I was taught to hate you. I'm unraveling from that.
Yeah.
I want you to come alongside me.
Yeah.
This is how you do it. So what is that call to belong? I think you had a good summary in the very beginning of the book.
Well, so yeah, Paul actually starts off the letter. This is what he says. Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. Oh, we're already in the Tanakh. We're already in the Torah. Concerning his son, who was descended from David, according to the flesh, and was declared to be the Son of God in power according to the Spirit of holiness by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord, through whom we have received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the nations, which are Gentile, including you who are called to belong to Jesus Christ, to all those in Rome who are loved by God and called to be saints. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. He covers the Hebraicness. He covers the Tanakh, the Torah, the Scriptures, and the fact that you're of the nations, you're the Gentiles, and you've been called to belong to this. It's all right there. Again, as always, as everything, hidden in plain sight. And like I said at the very end here, we endeavor to simplify and to clarify this call.
You know, it's not unlike people being introduced to a roof of a building for the first time. And they go, oh, look, the roof. The roof's going to save us from all kinds of weather. It's the greatest thing, keeps us warm. We want the roof. That's all we want. What about the walls? What about the front? No, the roof. That's all we want.
It's going to hover right there.
Right. So in order to have the roof, which you think is so spectacular, and the Yeshua is the roof, if you will, that came to save us, you need to understand the foundation that keeps everything in check. And so that's maybe as basic as it needs to get.
Yeah, and again, that's the whole reason why he was brought into salvation, it says in Acts, to teach the basic fundamentals of the Hebrew Scriptures to a pagan people group, Gentiles, that had no reference experience. And that's what he's doing. We're the ones that have balked at that, determining and deciding we don't need that foundation. We're good to go without it because of Jesus, which doesn't make any sense.
So really, we're reading Romans all wrong. We're nullifying Paul by our understanding of his very letter.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. And we've taken his basic job description away from him.
So, pays to look into things, get Romans, a call to belong, because if you don't get Romans, that's what this is for, right? To understand it right.
I think so. And like the Holy Spirit told us, I think week 1 in this teaching, this is how you get from church to bride. This is how you get from there to here.
Yeah. I want to say something about that. Where you told me during, between episodes here during the weeks, you told me that was just dropped on you sitting here. You've never said that before. And that if people watch it, they saw you tear up. And that was genuine because you understood that was from...
It was, well, it's a prophetic utterance. And the reason why I got all choked up is because, well, the Holy Spirit dropped on me and
you recognized who it was.
and that's what came out. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to hearing back what I said, because I only remember what I just said.
Exactly.
About the connection between church and bride and this being that pathway.
Well, thank you very much again, Allan,
Thanks for having me, as always.
Certainly. And there again is on the bottom of the screen where you can get this book. And it's Romans, A Call to Belong. Good for all those who understand the Torah, who don't understand the Torah, for anybody, right?
Yeah, and can I share one last thing with them?
Please do, yeah.
So in 3 days, on Monday, we will begin the Chameleon Church Monday night gathering, where we gather online. It's a live stream, Zoom for the interaction, Facebook, YouTube. And we're going through this book together.
Oh, cool.
So in 3 days, we will begin that.
Oh, very good. So what's the address?
You can Chameleon Church on YouTube, at Chameleon Church YouTube, at Chameleon Church Facebook, or go to the Chameleon Church website where it says live, Chameleon Church /live, and you'll see how you can join if you want to join Zoom.
Okay.
Be interactive. Yeah.
On Mondays. All right, cool.
Yeah, starting this coming Monday, yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Same here.
All right.
Fun.
Allan Aguirre, thanks very much.
Thank you
for joining us for this series. Great series. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we always enjoy having Allan here. And again, hopefully he can join us again soon.
Would love to.
Yeah. All you got to do is write another book,
Or something.
Or something. Sing a song, something. Anyhow, thank you for joining us. Have a good week. Shavua Tov. And until then, Shabbat Shalom.
Whenever and wherever you are watching this broadcast, it represents hundreds of man-hours of production and post-production, and then it goes out to the world in several different languages. Why is this possible? It's because people like you support this ministry. We do our best to get this out freely to the entire world. Freely you have received. Now, this is your opportunity to do as Yeshua said, and freely give.